At last.
Wait till you see me
Tread
in action.
lightly. No one orders me around. Finally. This is more like it. Tread lightly. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. Tread lightly. What is it now? What is it now? Tread lightly. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. What is it now? Tread lightly. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Speak, fool. Tread lightly. No one orders me around. What is it now? What is it now? Tread lightly. At last. This is more like it. No one orders me around. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. Tread lightly. What is it now? No one orders me around. At last. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Tread lightly. What is it now? Finally. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. For the Lich King. Now Frostmourne. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. This is more like it.
First blood.
At last. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Faithless counter. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Your pains are dead. Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it.
Our present town is under attack.
Frostmourne hungers. Tread lightly. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. At last. This is more like it. What is it? At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Tread lightly. No one orders me. What is it? Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. At last. Tread lightly. This is more like it. No one is me. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. What is it now? Tread lightly. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. At last. This is more like it. At last, for the Lich King. This is more like it. Now, finally, at last, Frostborn hungers. Glory to the Scourge. No one has me around. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Finally, at last, Frostborn hungers. Your pains end this torment. This is more like it. At last, Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last, this is more like it. What is it now? Finally. Tread lightly. Frostborn hungers. At last. At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. No one wants me around. At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. You will know end. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally. Speak, fool. What is it? No one orders me around. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Finally. Tread lightly. At last, Frostborn hungers. Speak, fool. Finally. This Frostborn hungers. At last, finally. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last, Frostborn hungers. Finally. This is more like it. What is it now? Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last, Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last. No one orders me around. Finally. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. Finally. At last. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers.
Double kill.
Tread lightly. This is more like it. No one was around. Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. At last. This is more like it. Your pain. Frostborn hungers. This is more.
Got it! Full speed ahead!
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Tread lightly. Frostborn hungers. Finally. Speak. What is it now? Tread lightly. At last. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. What is it now? Tread lightly. This is more like it. Finally. I'll make sure you suffer. At last. Fitness count. Frostborn hungers. Frostborn hungers. Finally.
Killing
This is more
spree.
like it. At last. Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally. This is at last. Frostborn hungers. Finally. This is Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn hungers. No one orders me around. This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last. Speak. Finally. What is it? This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. Frostborn hungers. Finally. At last. Tread lightly. Speak, fool. No one orders me. This is more like it. Finally. Frostborn hungers. At last. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. Frostborn hungers. At last. This is more like it. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
At last. Speak. Finally. This is more like it. At last. This is for the nation. Finally.
Our brethren's town is under attack. Double kill.
Frostborn hungers. At last. Glory to the
Mega kill. Triple kill.
What? Are you threatening me? Ah!
Tread lightly. At last. Finally. This is more like
Are you
it.
threatening me?
Frostborn hungers. What is it now? No one orders me around. This is more like it. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. At last. Tread lightly. Frostborn hungers. Finally. What is it now? Tread lightly.
Unstoppable.
Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Finally.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Finally. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. What is it now? At last. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last. last. Speak, fool. Finally. At
Our
last.
brethren's town is under attack.
This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Frostmourne
Our brethren's
hungers.
town is under attack.
This is more like it. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Tread lightly. Finally. What is it now?
Wicked sick.
No one orders me around. This is more like it. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally.
Our brethren's
This
town
is
is
more
under
like
attack.
At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. At last. Finally.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Speak, fool. At last. Tread lightly. No one orders me around.
Monster kill.
Speak, fool. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Speak, fool. What is it now? At last. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Now. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. This is Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Tread lightly.
Are you threatening me?
Is my aid required?
What?
No one orders me. What is it? At last. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is my at last. Tread lightly. No one orders me.
What?
Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Speak. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Tread lightly. Speak, fool. At last. No one orders me around. This is more like it. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. Finally. What is it now? No one orders me around. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Frostmourne
Are you threatening me?
Tread lightly. At last. Finally. This is more like it. No one orders me around. At last. Frostmourne hunger. Finally. At last.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Your pain shall be legendary. Frostborn hungers. This is Frostborn. At last. At last, Frostborn hungers. This is This is Frostborn hungers. At last. At last. This is more like it. Frostborn hunger. This is more like it. At last. What is it?
Our reference town is under attack.
This is more like it. At last. Frostborn hunger. At last. This is more like it. Frostborn hunger. Speak, fool. Frostborn hungers. Tread lightly. This is more like it. Tread lightly. What is it now? Speak, fool. No one orders me around. At last. Finally. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. Frostborn hungers. Finally. This is more like it. At last. This is Frostborn hungers. Finally. What is it now? Tread lightly. At last. Speak, fool. Frostborn hungers. Now, Frostborn. No one orders me. At last. Faithless coward. For the Lich King. Glory to the Scourge. Your pain shall be legendary. Now, Frostborn. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn.
Our reference town is under attack.
This is more like it. What is it? Speak, fool. Finally. Frostborn hungers. Tread lightly. No one orders me around.
Are you threatening me?
What is it now? This is more like it. What is it now? At last. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Finally.
What?
Tread lightly. At last. What is it now? Frostborn. This is more like it. No one orders me around. Frostborn hungers.
Are you threatening me?
Speak, fool. Tread lightly. No one
Our
orders me.
forces are under attack.
At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Speak. At last. What is it? For the Lich King. At last. This is Frostborn hungers. At last.
Our reference town is under attack.
Frostborn. At last. This is This is more like it. At last. Frostborn. Your pain can be
Killing spree. Double kill.
Frostborn hungers. Speak, fool. Tread lightly. No one orders me around. At last. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Finally. Frostborn hungers. At last. Tread lightly. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last.
Are you threatening me? Your pain shall
Finally. Tread lightly. Finally. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers.
glory to the scourge. I'll make sure of this. Faithless coward.
At last. Frostborn hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn At last. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn hungers. At last, Frostborn hungers. No one orders me around. Frostborn hungers. At last. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. Finally. What is it now? This is more like it. At last. Finally. This is more like it. This is more like it. Now. Last.
Double kill.